let's say that they said, all right, we are going to put villains in the back of the park and we need to figure out what we're doing with Frontierland. So our idea is a Pacific Northwest land. We're going to have some sort of ATV attraction not tied to an IP that is going to go around the Pacific Northwest. People would have been on board with that.
That is Tim Grassey, who's back for appearance number 9 here on the Tomorrow Society podcast. Hey there, thanks for joining me here on episode 247 of the Tomorrow Society podcast as we get closer to the final episode 250, which will be the series finale of the Tomorrow Society podcast. Once again, if you have anything you'd like to submit, a topic or idea for me to talk about on that show, send me an email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com. Glad to have Tim on one more time. This is his 9th appearance. Tim will be the winner of the most appearances on the Tomorrow Society podcast. And that doesn't include anyone submitting Updating Galaxy's Edge or any of those type of armchair imagineering shows. Tim is one of the co-hosts of the Marty Called podcast, along with Skipper Ben and Josh Fenton, and always fun to talk with. And today it's just kind of a crazy amount of different topics. We spent a good amount on Epic Universe, what we think about that and how it's going to go, Disney and what we're interested in for what they're doing in 2025. And then a lot of kind of related topics, a little bit on EPCOT. We talk about tropical Americas. And then I have Tim just kind of play a few fun games, surprise him with a few questions, and just dive into tons of theme park topics, which I think you are going to enjoy. I did want to know, we recorded this in the ancient past of last week, Tuesday. And after we recorded it, Disney, of course, announced news about Muppet Vision. They also made a change to the Premiere Pass. So a couple things we talk about are going to be a little out of date. At the end of the show, I will give my thoughts about the news on Muppet Vision and those few things that have changed since we recorded. So if you listen to this and you think, well, there's new news, just think, Disney literally 2 days after we recorded this then went and made changes. But stay tuned for the end for more on that. But I think most of what Tim and I talk about 98%, is still totally accurate in what is going on. This is a long one, so let's get right to it. Here is Tim Grassey. Tim, we're not messing around. It's the 9th time. We're diving right into these topics. So, Tim, Epic Universe, you heard about this. It's opening next May.
I'm familiar with it.
Have you heard about this?
Yes,
I'm
very
Grassey,
familiar.
for all of those who are joining, who didn't look at the title.
Do you have a coat for the 9 Timers Club like SNL? Is that
You're the only one. You're the only one. I don't think there's even anyone else who's done 8.
Take that, Ben. Take that, Len.
I think Glenn had 6 or 7, maybe. But whatever. Ben's only at like 5. We're going to stay focused here.
Okay.
Tim, what is going to be the sleeper hit? It can be a land or an attraction of Epic Universe. What's the sleeper hit that we are not talking about enough?
It's interesting that that's the term that people are using. So sleeper hit, can mean different things to different people. But anybody that says Frankenstein Experiment or Battle at the Ministry just simply don't know what that term means, because those are going to be the hits of the park. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The day that we're recording this, they posted some photos inside Battle at the Ministry. It looks amazing. So it's not either of those. So not that I'm not excited about those, but I actually, when they announced the lands of this park, the one that I kind of dismissed early on was How to Train Your Dragon. And I think Hiccup's Wing Gliders has Slinky Dog potential, probably with better aesthetics. Fire Drill, I've never been on a ride like that. I think you have been.
Yes, I've been soaked on a ride like that multiple times. It looks fun.
That, and I think the Untrainable Dragon show, as well as the Harry Potter Cirque Arcanus, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm pretty excited about the shows as well. Perhaps that's just a sign of me getting older, but I think How to Train Your Dragon in general, second answer would be the two shows that are going, one to Harry Potter and one to How to Train Your Dragon Land, are things that they're not going to necessarily move the needle attendance wise, but they are going to help round out the day. And those are the things that are really good for a park like that. I mean, there's what, a baker's dozen of rides there, plus these shows. It's a full day park, and Disney doesn't have three of their parks don't have that lineup. So
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I almost in my head almost forget. Oh yeah, everyone's gonna go to Nintendo, but we don't really need to talk about that right now. But Isle of Berk, you mentioned it. I saw BioReconstruct did a video above that Hiccups Wing Gliders, which also looks to have show scenes too.
Yeah,
forwards and backwards.
Even if they're primitive, I'll take it.
Oh, I know. And also too, they have the Dragons Racers Rally, which is what's called a Gerstlauer Skyfly, which there's
I'm going to puke on that. So I'm not. That's not an option for me.
I did one. I did it. There's a park in Iowa called Lost Island, which is one of the few. This is a very common ride in Europe.
Yeah.
But I did one on there, and it was a single. It wasn't the double. And the key is you can just float around. You don't have to flip. You can just float around and be like, hey. And this one looks higher up in the air too, and it's fun. Now, if you want to, you can do this thing where you move your legs and start flipping yourself. I did not do that, but that looks really fun. That's not something that's at a lot of amusement parks. Like no one goes to Lost Island. There was like 100 people there when I went there. It's in the middle of nowhere. So it really hasn't been experienced by most people. So you add that. And then you mentioned the live shows. That live show is similar live show in Beijing. I haven't watched the video, but then
I deliberately haven't watched it, but I just heard rave reviews of it.
I think about like Waterworld. I know this isn't similar, but you can have a live show if it's done well with
it's a great
big scale. And I suspect the one in Harry Potter will be great too. I think Isle of Berk. But the one I was thinking, because I had a feeling, Tim, when I sent you these topics, most of them we are going to do, just to let everyone know, we're going to talk about a bunch of different topics on this show that I have sent to Tim.
We're not just going to talk about EPCOT for 2 hours?
No, I actually looked back to one of the old episodes, hour and 25 minutes just about EPCOT. And I even listened to it. I was just like,
seems a little light.
Yeah, I was like, and this was in like 2018. And the funny thing is the issues are like the same things we talk about now, probably. But regardless, I had a feeling you were going to talk about Isle of Berk. I had a feeling you were. And I should also mention that there will be some other topics Tim's not aware of that I will throw at him during the show. But most of it he will know about. I thought this would be what you talk about. And actually, because I heard you on the recent Marty Call, as I had already written this, and then I'm listening to the new Marty Call, and I hear Isle of Berk might be the sleeper hit of the park. And I'm like, God, Tim, I don't know if it was you or Ben that said it, but here's what I think. What you said is totally correct. I think Stardust Racers. Okay, I know it's in the middle of the park and it's the middle, but it's like they took a giant dueling launch steel coaster and put it in the middle of like Main Street USA in the hub. And also, I'll talk about this with another question, but there's not an IP connected to it. It's got only one inversion, but it's this new celestial spin where the two trains, one goes up and one goes down. I'm using my hands like anyone can see this. And I'm looking at this going, if somebody just took this ride and put it in a park, everyone would be like, this is amazing. This is the newest great thing. But because we have Dark Universe and Harry Potter and all that, it's almost like, oh yeah, they're going to have this dueling coaster in the front of the park that looks awesome. And it's going to be like at night, they're going to light up the ride vehicles. I don't know, Tim. I mean, I know it's not, I don't know if this might be too intense for you. I don't know. You're not a big coaster person anymore, but you've gone.
I do like coasters.
Yeah, you've done the Magic
I like
Mountain, and I've heard you talk about that. So
I just can't do like 9 of them in a row, like some people.
No, I could ride like people that like go to those like, where they run them like late at night and they ride it like 10 times in a row. And I'm like, you guys are crazy. I could do like 2.
I'm about to turn 42. I'm old.
I'm older than that, and I'm still doing this. But I think that could be a sleeper hit along with everything you just said, because I feel like it's almost like we're narrowing it down, because it's like I don't feel like Nintendo, the main Harry Potter and main Monsters rides. I also wonder about the Wolfman ride. I think that could be better than people think too. But
so you say that like I guess the secondary coasters. So I agree that Stardust now I'm questioning myself.
It's
Stardust or Starfall.
Now.
Okay,
Stardust
Racers.
And they had to change it.
So Ziggy Stardust Racers is, I mean, that is the coaster in the park. I actually think of the secondary coasters that Hiccups Wing Gliders will probably be a better ride than Donkey Kong, and probably be a better ride than the Wolfman ride. I think Donkey Kong is going to be mild intensity. It's going to be the gimmick, and it will look cool. But in general, there's a guy on Twitter that follows me, Brer Oswald. He's a listener to my show and probably yours as well. He used the term candy lands, and I think that's appropriate for like the Nintendo lands where they're just super bright colors. It's not really my thing. And That being said, like the ride was fine. Mario Kart was a perfectly fine attraction. I think people were just so down on it when I experienced it that like I had such low expectations. But I actually think that Donkey Kong is going to be more of an aesthetic experience as opposed to the actual ride experience being good. But we'll find out soon enough because it's opening in Japan very soon.
Yeah, it was supposed to open a while ago, and now I'm finally starting to see previews of the land. So I think it's supposed to open, well, I mean, really soon. Probably by the time this comes out, it'll be open. If I forget the exact date, but regardless, that's interesting. Well, we've already kind of.
I'm excited about the entire park. Let's not mince words about it. If no ifs, ands, or buts, I'm excited about everything.
Well, yeah, and now it kind of leads us into the next topic, which is, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but what are you most excited about? I think everyone has the same answer, but that's okay. Let's dive into it.
I mean, the photos that came out today inside the Battle at the Ministry just look amazing. I'm not a big horror guy, but the Frankenstein experiment, after seeing those AAs, just looks amazing as well. So it's basically like 1A, 1B, those two things. They're going to be the anchors of this park. And I just hope that they hit. I mean, nothing that we've seen thus far says anything otherwise, that these look to be major attractions and hopefully pushing the competition even further than they have.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it, both of them. I mean, Monsters Unchained, I mean, having so many animatronics, but it looks like it's like the next evolution of Forbidden Journey. It's like they're using the Kuka arms again, but they have more big animatronics again, but even more. And so, I mean, that you think about it, Forbidden Journeys, opened more than 10 years ago. So it's like in that time, they've maybe have, though my only concern with both of these is I hope that they're, like we've seen with things like Rise of the Resistance and stuff, hopefully they don't break down a lot because they're so cutting edge. Because at first, Forbidden Journey wasn't perfect when it opened at first. It had some issues, not on the level of Rise of the Resistance. But then, like Harry Potter, I still don't totally understand the omnidirectional lifts. They look like Tower of Terror ride vehicles, but I know they're not. It's crazy to think about what those ride vehicles are going to do even.
I'm expecting it to be somewhat similar conceptually to Rise of the Resistance, meaning that it'll employ multiple ride systems at once. So I don't know if I think the entire vehicle, though, is actually on the Star Tours motion simulator base. And I could be just woefully wrong here, but this is the impression that I'm getting, that there's that motion simulator base component of it, but also the ability to freely roam like a trackless vehicle and presumably some semblance of a drop tower. So I don't think there's going to be anything truly comparable to it, but Rise of the Resistance, just by the descriptions alone that we've heard, seem to be the most logical comparison.
Yeah, and the queue, again, speaking of Rise of the Resistance, you see the pictures of the queue and you're like, okay, that's not concept art. No. Like it's like you're walking these massive rooms. I'm like, I don't know how, I mean, that building is huge already, but yeah, I mean, and
we salivated walking into Gringotts too, when we saw those photos and videos of that area and the previews as well. So, I mean, they do a good job. There's no sugarcoating it. So it's hard to not be super hyped about this.
Yeah, I mean, I know J.K. Rowling notwithstanding, and not to go down that road, I'm just saying, but as a theme park fan, you look at that and you're like, I don't even know. I mean, I've read the books and watched the movies, but I'm not someone who gets that emotional about Harry Potter or anything. But I look at just the scale of these attractions and I'm like, oh boy.
I mean, it's artwork too. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a big Avatar fan, but I love the land. And I remember being there on opening weekend and just waiting in those several hour long lines with several thousand of my closest friends, but I struck up a conversation with people behind me and I was just saying, like the passion doesn't necessarily have to be about the IP. And we've made that argument if you want to go back to those EPCOT shows. But just looking at this as an art form and taking a step back from that. And you don't necessarily need to get emotional or teary-eyed about it if it's walking into your favorite movie or anything like that, but just appreciate the work that is done by Universal Creative from what we've seen already and what we'll see in person in a few months. Less than 6 months now, right?
It's crazy.
6 and change, I guess 6 in a week.
Yeah, I mean it should be about 6 months from when
6 months when the
this
show
comes
goes
out.
out.
Yeah, I mean we're recording this like a week before it comes out, so it's not that big of a lead time. But I will say also, just to mention Curse of the Werewolf, the launch spinning coaster. The reason I mention it too, it's a family ride, but there's a ride. It's done by Mock Rides, who are also doing Stardust Racers, but they did a ride at Silver Dollar City near where I live called Time Traveler, which is a spinning coaster, but it has inversions. But the ride vehicles and the way they're kind of moving look a lot like that. So this isn't as extreme. Those are called extreme spinners. There's also one in Europe called Ride to Happiness. This is like a family version of that. But I'm like, if this is, because those are so smooth and it's controlled spin. It's not just like your Carnival Wild Mouse spinner or your Primeval Whirl kind of thing or whatever, to quote a Disney ride. It's controlled, but if it could even be like 2/3 of that, plus with trees and everything, and there's the wolf and everything, it could be cool. I don't know.
I think the entirety of it just needs to be experienced, but it's no secret that what we're most hyped about are Battle at the Ministry and Monsters Unchained. Monsters Unchained. Excuse me. They're also changing. But all of it in general, I mean, just walking into a new theme park of that scale it's been a while since I've done that. I guess first time going to Tokyo, walking into Animal Kingdom for the first time, walking into Islands of Adventure for the first time. But those last two that I just mentioned were really the ones that are parks that we could kind of identify with simply because they're in our backyards. But I mean, that's been 20 plus years. So.
Yeah, I remember going to Animal Kingdom because I went to MGM, but I was pretty young the first year. But I remember going to Animal Kingdom like a month after it opened. Not really like, it just happened to be we had a trip, and I was, to date me a little bit, I was like 22, I think at the time. Yeah, and he was not even fully, like, it didn't have that many attractions, but still going into a new park where it's like everything is new. And to have this where we have not seen a park, even, I mean, Islands of Adventure had a lot of rides and they had their poor advertising or whatever, but to have this have so many attractions up front and shows, and I know they'll make adjustments, and who knows if some of the entertainment, like the Burning Blade Tavern with the meet and greet, the people, the monster hunters, all that stuff. I hope this isn't like
dragons flying over Isle of Berk, all of that. I mean, what stays, what doesn't, but
right.
I mean, the reputation for that type of stuff getting cut is more in Disney. Let's call it what it is. Yeah,
and I think if this is a hit, which thus far I've heard nothing that makes me think that it won't be, they'll keep pushing. This is what Universal does. There's already talks of Luigi's Mansion or they have expansion pads. I don't think it'll happen the first few years, but it's going to be fun. I don't know.
Yeah, you don't want to blow your. Well, I will also cut my turn of phrase.
We know what you were going to say.
Yeah, yes. You don't want to put everything out. Put all your cards on the table right away. There we go. Let's clean this up.
We've only got a few episodes left. We're not doing a blue show just because
Tomorrow's Society, sponsored by George Carlin.
It's like get to episode 247. You're like, whatever. So let's change gears a little bit here. And, it seems a little bit of a letdown to be like, and now let's talk about what Disney's doing in 2025. But I am curious because they are opening some things and a few are interesting. But what is the thing that interests you the most of the various additions or changes or whatever they're doing in 2025?
So I would have said McKim's Mile House, but I'm a little bit disappointed that it's not after Bill McKim of Test Track. So I'm speaking of another piece of information that dropped today. The DVC Lounge going into Frontierland is named after Disney legend Sam McKim. This is a long walk for a bad joke. I am actually looking forward to the Test Track redo. I think that it was an e-ticket in Epcot that never had that kind of cachet as your modern e-tickets. It did back in the day. And I was a fan of the second version of Test Track. I actually think the pre-show and post-show were pretty reminiscent of like an evolved step forward Epcot. The ride itself was a little bit too sterile and never really worked, but it wasn't bad. There was nothing wrong with it. They did say that they're going to bring this back to Epcot Center with some World of Motion vibes, but I don't know if that just means putting the logo all over the place like they did in the second version, or if it'll actually have the whimsy that World of Motion had. We really just don't know much about it, but that's really the biggest thing. I don't like It's Tough to Be a Bug. I don't like Zootopia going into the Animal Kingdom, so that's a net neutral item there. I mean, I'll go see the show, but I don't normally see It's Tough to Be a Bug. It's probably been a decade since I've actually been in that theater. So
I got to ask you this before you go on to other things. Has there ever been a new attraction that nobody talks about, that Disney seems to doesn't care about, than this Zootopia show going into Tough to Be a Bug? Like, I keep forgetting it's even happening.
It got half a line of the song that
right.
was done at the D23 Expo. I mean, it's something. It's being refreshed, and we talk about what can be done over the next few years, because really Disney isn't going to have any new rides until 2027 at the earliest, right? Tropical Americas. So it is things like this, like replacing those B and C ticket show experiences that can be done. And they are doing things like that. You've got a Disney Villain show coming to the Cars Theater, Little Mermaid show eventually, if they decide that they're not putting Monsters Inc. in that area, but and a new parade. I mean, a Disney Starlight Parade going to the Magic Kingdom. I was a big Spectra Magic fan. I've seen Main Street Electrical Parade way too many times. I think if I were to back into how many hours of my life have been spent watching Main Street Electrical Parade, I'm probably going to start getting depressed. Yes. I miss Spectra Magic. I still like that music when it comes up on my phone periodically. I'll listen to it. But I mean, I'm trying to think what else I've missed here. The Smuggler's Run new mission.
Spaceship, that's 2026, I believe.
It is, maybe. Okay.
The Spaceship Earth Lounge.
I mean, it's nice that they're there. The Spaceship Earth Lounge, and then there's another one, the Pirates Lounge.
Bar or whatever, yeah.
I think they're going to be too small. I mean, it is what it is.
No, the Walt Disney. What about Walt Disney?
I mean, the Walt Disney AA going to Disneyland, I mean, I'm not going to be there until probably 2026 anyway.
Yeah.
So I hope it's not... I mean, that's one where a roll of the dice to see actually how good it is. Thankfully, AAs have advanced so much that it hopefully won't look creepy, and you're not going to be able to get face-to-face with it, which is a good thing
probably
as well.
A good thing.
I mean, we've had, just looking at the humanoid figures that are in Hall of Presidents, we've had some pretty bad sculpts lately. Last few presidents do not exactly look
even the
point.
Obama wasn't great.
No, it's not.
I don't know. It's like somehow the Clinton and Bush were more believable. I don't understand it.
I think, Trump, I think they just tried to redo the Hillary one, to be honest with you. I don't remember if the Biden one is good or not, but Obama and Trump are not good figures. No. Well, the figures themselves are good. They're just not great sculpts. And again, I don't know. I'm clearly not an artist here, and I don't mean to be condemning somebody's work, but it just didn't hit particularly well. And I'm not the first one to say it. Like, Trump looks like John Voight to me.
Yeah, and I admit I haven't even seen it in person, the Trump one. We have a question about that later. You know, we don't need to go into that now about Liberty Square, but the ones that jumped out at me, I think I did not list all of them to myself because I was thinking we'll just zone in because there's, I'm sure there's something I'm forgetting, but the ones that were Test Track 3.0 and the Disney Starlight, which actually. I'll start with the parade, because having the parade to me at Magic Kingdom, it doesn't even matter if it's that good. I hope it's good, but just having a nighttime parade, I think really helps that work.
It's a line in the sand for when people go home. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you do a parade at 8:00 at night, that gets a good chunk of the crowd out. People watch it on the way out, and they don't stick around for fireworks, because if you've got kids that are, at a certain age, you want that final piece of that kiss goodnight is the term that they would use. And how many people would leave the park after the parade? Whereas now when the fireworks are at 9:00, they would leave. They wouldn't necessarily wait for the fireworks. Mm-hmm. The parade gives them a definitive thing to do and see on their way out.
Yeah, and it changes crowd patterns, because if you don't want to watch the parade, you might have a better chance to see attractions because more people are going to spread around the park versus just everyone crowding in the hub. It might spread people out more. There's a lot of interesting things that I think it'll do. I hope it's good, and I hope it isn't one of those oh, we did this for the summer and we're going to stop. It seems like it's for the future. And actually, with the Magic Kingdom having a lot of construction coming, I think they're going to need it.
Yeah, they're going to need that.
Because they're going to need stuff like that. So, and then Test Track, the thing that excites me is less about World of Motion, because I found that, I think about Epcot Forever and things that I get my hopes up too much for things like this. And then I'm just like, eh. So it's more about when they say they're going to add show scenes, I think regardless of what those are, like, especially I think it's going to be more around that space where you kind of go around the road a few times before you almost hit that truck. Mm-hmm. They may have some scenes there. They may have scenes earlier in the ride too, because it seems pretty extensive. I think the exterior already looks awesome. So I think, I don't expect anything groundbreaking, but I think it's going to be good. And I also think it's really going to help that park. Test Track already was popular, but one, just having it back will help, but also having it back and be good. And then hopefully
hopefully higher demand.
Right. And they can make Guardians have standby maybe.
Yeah.
And then we can do it. We can do it.
You can pull some people away from, because Test Track, we know what the ride system is. It's not going to change drastically. The track, I assume, is going to stay exactly the same. And it is less intense than Guardians. So theoretically, you're going to be pulling away people from Ratatouille and Frozen in some cases. So the high demand lightning lanes will have another category, another attraction to pull people away from it. So all of those are good things. And you mentioned traffic patterns with Magic Kingdom. This will change the traffic patterns if it vaults from like the bottom of the upper echelon thrill attraction in that park to say right below Cosmic Rewind. That's not insignificant. That just raises the bar a little bit.
Oh yeah, and I know it kind of bottles everyone over there, but Ratatouille's still popular, Frozen's still popular, so you can you spread things out well. And now we're getting into the topics that we would talk about in past shows a lot. We can just run on that road. But I want to ask you, speaking of lines and different things, we recently have something. It's being piloted, Tim. It's piloted is what they say. But the new Lightning Lane Premier Pass. I actually talked to Becky from Touring Plans, who does a lot of their numbers and everything else. And she compared it. She said basically that it's priced like the unlimited Universal Express, the one where you can go all the time, but it actually functions like the regular Express, which is like half the price. Not always, but about that. So I feel like, there's things in it that seem too restrictive, but I'm sure they have reasons. But my question for you is, would you ever buy this? Could you see a situation? Assuming they don't chop the prices down, assuming that is near the
current pricing,
upper
rules.
end. I know it's up to amount, or it might be starting. I forget. But assuming that Magic Kingdom's like $450 and Animal Kingdom, like they said, would you ever buy this?
So it's not a simple yes or no answer, because it's me and that's how I answer questions.
That's okay.
But right now, you've got the caveat of needing to be staying at a deluxe villa, a deluxe resort as well. So that already for me is going to make this a non-starter in Florida. I think unless I win the lottery, and there is, I think Powerball's up tonight. So if that's on the table, maybe. But I do see in Disneyland that it is far more viable. And I'm not trying to dismiss the price point, because the price point is still very significant out there, but you don't have to stay in a Disneyland hotel. You get 2 parks for it. And I think the way that I'm more likely to visit Disneyland would be with a day or 2 buffer around a D23 Expo. So if I've got Expo starts on Friday, I fly in on Wednesday, I pay for this on Thursday, I can hit both parks, hit 25 attractions, and that might be my move on a future trip. So I think it is reasonable in Disneyland. And I understand why people do it in Florida too. I think that the way people look at this is for the uber rich. No, the uber rich are getting the horse jockeys that walk around and guide you at whatever that is, like $500 an hour. With a minimum of 8 hours, something like that. I'm probably off on those numbers, but I think you're
undershooting it. I think it's like
it is not insignificant.
Dollars per hour, but it's for like 10 people. But yeah, go on.
Anybody that's listening to the show has gone to Disney World and then subsequently received surveys, and on those surveys they ask for demographics of household income. And this isn't necessarily trying to hit that top bracket of income. What they're seeing is, all right, let's say it's divided into 8 categories. That the top bracket will eliminate the top categories. So income brackets 5 through 7 on here, your next highest brackets, they're probably all spending the same amount of money if you have that much money coming to the household. But the range of income might be between $200,000 a year and $500,000 a year. So they're looking at this as a way of, all right, for those people that are making $500,000 a year, how do we get more of their money relative to the people that are making $200,000 a year? Those poor, I don't think, those poor people that are only making $200,000 a year. That's really where I think this is approaching here. Or the person that's got one day and they want to just maximize that one day. Now, I don't think there's going to be many people that are going to be going and getting Lightning Lane Premier Pass every day of their trip. But I could see it happening, at least not for a full-on week. I could see it happening if somebody's got 2 or 3 days to just maximize their time. For me, in Disneyland, that's where I would probably most likely use it. And even then, though, like when you're flying solo out there, you can accomplish quite a bit without really needing this.
Well, especially, that is an interesting point about Disneyland. I hadn't really thought about that, but especially even just Genie Plus, because, or whatever you call it now, sorry, Lightning Lane Multipass, which I used it before they changed it over, but still, Disneyland works better because there's so many attractions and all of that. So I think that is even more valuable. But yeah, it almost said, like, I could never see a scenario of paying to use this at Animal Kingdom or even at EPCOT. And even the only one in Florida that I could see this making a point would be Magic Kingdom. But even that, I guess because I've been there so much, I'm like, yeah, I don't care if I miss some stuff. But it's different if somebody's like never been there. And it's like, if it's like you and I going to Tokyo for them, like they're never going to, I mean, I could say they're likely to not be back. Maybe it's worth it as a splurge, like how people splurge to see like Taylor Swift or Bruce Springsteen or whomever, some high concert. But as something that people do on a regular basis, I agree with you. It just seems like, especially because you can only ride each ride once.
Right.
And I know that's how Universal Express is, the regular version. And actually, I think your Disneyland analogy kind of relates to going to like Universal and doing 2 parks and buying Express on one day and just trying to hit everything. But this is more expensive in I think, than that. I mean, it depends on the day, but I think it's more it's about double.
The price point at the Magic Kingdom is definitely more expensive.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that, first off, it's not going to be flat for the next 3 years. But by the time that Villains Land and Cars Land open up, and you've got 3 major attractions and 1 minor attraction probably added to the attraction lineup, you're going to see the demand for something like this, depending on whether or not those are included in that mix. I'm also making a pretty big bet that Disney doesn't change their line skipping procedure because it's been 2 months since they've last changed it. And prior to that, it was another 2 months before that. So they change it pretty much twice a year at this point, it seems like. But all of that are factors in play. And again, you're not wrong that we've been to Disney World so many times that this isn't for us. And I do think that we have to recognize that not everything that Disney puts out there is for us. It is, I think this is going to probably disappear much in the same way that like one day group of 10 tour for $2,500 kind of disappeared from the narrative. It was one news cycle long that it really lasted. I don't think this is going to be really a talking point for much more than another month. It'll exist, but I don't think it's a huge thing.
It wouldn't shock me that it kind of drifts away a little bit. But also too, another thing I should mention is like Universal Express, you can use it for the Velocicoaster. You don't have to, and Disney's, I believe does this not, okay.
This includes every one. It includes Tiana's. It includes all of the upcharge ones.
It does include all the single passes too. Okay. That was what in my head, I had this like brain thing where I went, wait, does it include that? Because it has to include those, because there's no way you're going to also then pay for Flight of Passage and all that. It has to.
I mean, don't get me wrong. You still have to do mental gymnastics to make the math work.
Yeah.
But it's a function of time savings. Trying to monetize it is not really, you're not going to back into $429 when you figure out, all right, it's $15 for Mine Train and $22 for Tron. That in itself isn't going to work. You're going to get, by doing each of those, by paying for each of those, plus the Lightning Lane multipass, you're at like 60 to 70 bucks a head. But you're still scheduling. You're still having things that are somewhat encumbered. And with Lightning Lane multipass, you're not going to get on 18 attractions. You're just simply not going to, it's not going to happen. So this allows you to do that, but it's really about the time savings and the convenience of it. Like so many things that Disney charges for, they create a problem and charge for the solution.
Interesting. Well, that's enough about that. That's bringing me down a little bit. So now we're going to do a quick little thing that bonus game here that you are not prepared for. It's not super complicated. It's just a very simple this or that. I will list two things. You tell me which you like, which you prefer.
Okay.
Pretty simple. You ready?
Yep.
Ready, Tim? Okay. And Tim has not been prepped on these categories.
Is this about the parks or something totally unrelated?
Mostly all about the parks.
Okay.
There may be a few that are tangential, but most the idea.
People want to hear about our fantasy league, Dan. Give the people what they want.
All right. Simple one to start. Tron or Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind?
Cosmic Rewind.
Yes. This might be harder.
You're like, that is correct.
Yeah. Horizons or the original Journey into Imagination?
Ooh, that's a tougher one. Both are correct answers. I'm going to go with Horizons.
Yeah, I would go with Horizons, but you can make a strong argument about Imagination.
There is a Grassy family soft spot for Imagination. I remember I think before we even knew that it was closed, this might have been the Animal Kingdom trip. When did it close? Was it 97 or 98?
It closed. I went on it in 98 when we went in May, so I think it either closed at the end of that year or early 99.
So I was in Disney World in April of 98. And another buddy also named Tim and I went on Imagination 14 times in a row. So this is what happens when, let's see, so 98, 16-year-old Tim is left to his own devices in Epcot. Rather than getting into trouble, I just wrote Imagination over and over again.
When I was, I think, in my early 20s, we were like, okay, it was so empty. And it was like May. This is 98, different era. We were like, we're going to go to every single one of the movies and weird shows and everything. And we did it in like a day and a half. There was a lot then. There's a lot, yeah. You had Food Rocks. You got to go to like all the different, there's a lot of things. The intervention stuff. Oh my goodness. Okay.
There's a lot in interventions. Yeah, there was.
Yeah, we didn't do every single thing, but we tried to do a lot of the big stuff. Okay.
Did you hit the Great Piggy Bank Adventure?
I don't remember. My memory is little. I didn't go to as much to interventions.
There was the one with Jim Cantori as well. I remember that one.
Communicore, I remember very well because I went there a lot as a kid, being a little bit older. I went on that a lot. Okay. This is our back pain question. Okay. Space Mountain at Disney World or the Matterhorn?
I mean, I think the Matterhorn is unrideable. Space Mountain, I'll at least ride. My oldest daughter was about a quarter of an inch too short to go on the Matterhorn when we were last in Disneyland, and she's talking about it. She continues, next time we go to California, am I going to be big enough to ride Matterhorn? It's like, yes, you are. Hopefully we'll wait until you're old enough. Yeah, you're going to be able to ride it by yourself. We'll wait until you're, or whatever it is. Is it?
I don't even know what the age
14?
Is. Something like that's pretty high.
Yeah, she's 4 now, so we got a ways to go.
I have Matterhorn the last 3 times I've been to Disneyland. Basically, every time I've been as an adult has been closed. So I've never ridden as an adult, Tim. So I asked this question because every time I go, it's closed for refurbishment. I don't know what it is. So
Bob Gurr is a Disney legend. It is, but this was the very first tubular steel roller coaster, as your listeners know. The turns aren't logical. It doesn't flow correctly, and it is rickety.
Okay.
It is not something. If they demolish it tomorrow, I would not bat an eye. And I know that's blasphemous.
It's so cool just to look at. I think it's really nice having that.
I would like to see them rebuild it. Don't get me wrong. I like the idea of it, but the ride is unrideable.
All right. Here's another one. Downtown Disney and Pleasure Island in its heyday or Disney Springs today?
So I'm not really the right person to be asked this question. I'm going to say Disney Springs, but I didn't experience Pleasure Island. That's pretty much it. I didn't truly experience Pleasure Island, so I'm not the person to ask this question.
Yeah, I think I go with the former. Not that I'm an expert on Pleasure Island. I went to the Adventurers Club a few times, went to the Comedy Warehouse once, but I also just love the fact that you didn't have to worry about the stupid parking garages and all the chaos.
I don't mind the parking garages. I think Disney Springs is a great evolution of it. There's some fantastic dining there, and it's in general a positive, but I also don't have the nostalgia that so many people have towards Pleasure Island, so that's not really a fair question.
And I say in its heyday because I'm not talking about what it was like in the year before it closed or something, because then it's a totally different thing.
Disney does have the tendency to neglect things to the point where it's okay to replace them.
Basically. Okay, now we're going to veer away a little bit here to an important question for you.
Okay.
Now this is two things, but there's a group. Okay. Alex Verdugo, Connor Wong, and Jeter Downs, or Mookie Betts, David Price, and Cash. Which one? And I'm simplifying it for the listeners. There's other variations to the thing that I'm not even going to get into.
It's kind of a no-brainer. I'm going to stick with the Mookie side, but it's all going to change once the Red Sox sign Juan Soto, so we'll be fine.
Is that going to happen?
No.
Okay.
Not with the
I know it's not going to happen here. The Cardinals are rebuilding, so So that relates to this question: who's going to win more games in 2025, the Cardinals or the Red Sox?
So the Red Sox were 500 this year. What did the Cardinals finish?
Oh man, I think the Cardinals were below. I actually should have looked at that. I was going to look at that. I'm going to do it on the fly here while we podcast. Of course, I could just.
I'm going to say the Red Sox because I'm a homer at heart.
Yeah,
the Red Sox win 88 games.
Oh, the Cardinals won 83. They actually were.
Oh, okay, they were.
I can't believe they were over 500. They seem so bad. But I think the Cardinals are going to be worse this year. So if you think the Red Sox, who actually won 81, so the Cardinals had more. But the Cardinals
Sox are going to win 88 games.
Are going to win 75 this year. So do you think the Red Sox will win more than that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially if they sign Soto.
Now we're moving away from baseball. That's it. That's all we got for you. I just thought the Mookie Betts thing, I just really wanted to poke you on that one because
thanks.
I can't believe that trade. And there's other parts of it too, like that I didn't even get into with like Bruce
the Sox
Gratterall and all that stuff. Yeah, oh man. Okay. Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey or Flight of Passage?
I know this is an audio experience and I'm hemming and hawing on a video.
I can cut the pausing a little bit,
I'm going to say Flight of Passage, but I mean, it's a coin flip. I won't begrudge anybody that choice. If it was Hagrid's versus Flight of Passage, I'm taking Hagrid's.
Yeah, I haven't been on Hagrid's, but It's a close one for me. I am annoyed at Forbidden Journey because at Universal Hollywood, they told us we were going in the single rider line and led us to it. And then somehow we ended up in the standby line and waited over an hour for it. And my kids
it's
were
kind of confusing entry point. To give you some credit, like it's 3 different lines, and because it's dark in there, it's very easy to get on the wrong line. And I think I've done the same thing. So yeah.
I should have realized it sooner. Instead, I thought, well, maybe this line's just, and then the ride kept breaking down. So
if I remember correctly, it's dark, and the signs for which line you go in are elevated, so it's not the clearest thing in the world. So it's yes, you should be able to read, but at the same time, it's an easy enough mistake to make.
I still love the ride, but if I mention it to either of my kids, they just think about how long we waited in line. So they think about being in the room with like where Harry and Ron and Hermione appear, where the ride broke down, for like 30 minutes. And we don't need to see that 30 times or whatever. Okay. Well, we kind of referenced this earlier. Test Track 1.0 or 2.0?
I'll say 1.0. I think the pre-show and post-show of 2.0 were better.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the music is a lot better in 2.0 too. But
yeah,
I think it's close. I think 1.0 has the dry humor.
Yeah, and it's a little bit more charming, and we talk about that on our podcast. That something that has a little more charm, whereas 2.0 was more sterile. It had that very computerized feel, and it had the Tron feel. Is really what it had. Probably by design, not by definitely by design. So
it was the first attraction that really used magic bands, which I thought was interesting. Like magic bands,
poorly, but it used them.
Used them not just to get in the ride, like actually to carry your thing. Yeah,
that never worked correctly, and I think that's part of the problem. If they were able to better incorporate that beyond just the occasionally working rankings, then that would have improved the ride tremendously.
So like, why does our car have no score? Oh, now our car's not even up there. What is going on? I don't understand.
I mean, they could have, I don't want to get too deep into it, but they could have better visually represented the cars that you created on screens in the ride and have like your cars go through the same test you just did. There was a multitude of ways that they could have made 2.0 better. So,
yeah, I talked to one of the guys who, like, the show producer on it, and from what it sounds like, the time they had to do that,
they did that very quickly,
was basically insane. I mean,
they did it in under a year.
Yeah, it's not his fault. What they accomplished with the time and what they had to do is pretty amazing. And I know, I'm sure he's not listening, but I'm just saying that what they had to do and what they accomplished was great, but that doesn't, years later, it doesn't matter anymore. It's like,
once it's open, yeah. Disney generally doesn't go back and give it more of a budget.
Okay, this is the final question in this. Most important question for you, Tim. Skipper Ben or Josh Fenton? What is the answer?
I don't know. Josh abandoned us, but
you don't really have to answer it.
I'll answer. I don't care.
Well, just for the listeners, Skipper, Ben, and Josh are his co-host on the Marty Paul podcast. But go on.
Ben was needling me about fantasy earlier today, so I guess it depends on the day. Josh hasn't given me crap in the last 24 hours, so I'm going to say that Ben's on my S list instead of Josh right now.
So Josh wins. Okay.
Yeah, I will say Josh wins.
All right.
And I will say to listeners of the Marty Call podcast, we have a couple of shows coming up, and Josh will be on one of them, as will the host of this show opposite me.
Oh, yes. I'm excited about that. I enjoy being guest. I can't wait for the day when
you don't have to edit.
I can just be a guest on people's shows.
That's why I'm agreeing to this. I don't have to edit it.
Yeah, I don't know how much editing there's going to be, Tim. We're almost near the end of the show.
You're going to get a lot of ums.
Now, I'll still edit it for listeners' sake. I still will do that. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled topics here. So we did a whole podcast a while back kind of on this topic, but it was more connected to the pandemic. So I'm curious, we've talked about Disney not having any really big things in 2025, but some things that could be fun. But are there some moves, like it could be customer service, upgrading attractions, whatever. Are there things Disney could do next year, let's say? It's not going to make people forget about Epic Universe, but it might draw people in or have people happier when they go. Or there's some things that you would do, big or small, not open a new ride. I'm talking about things that they legitimately do. Yeah.
It takes them 6 years to build things. So, I mean, the easiest thing is entertainment, but they've made so many changes to the guest experience, and you just kind of danced around it right there. Most of them related to the various line skipping programs and things like that haven't really hit 100%. I still don't think they've got it yet. They basically reverted back to paid FastPass Plus, and I don't think that's where they want it to be. It can't be. And I haven't experienced it in person in Florida yet, but I think tweaks to that could help. In terms of smaller things, though, I'd like to see nightly fireworks return to Hollywood Studios. I think that can draw people, but I don't think Hollywood Studios is going to be the park that's going to have problems when Epic Universe opens. It's going to be Animal Kingdom and it's going to be Epcot. And those are the hardest parks to really address here, because Luminous is an otherwise forgettable show, but they're not going to replace it. They already just did it. It's a new enough show and not really the problem. Bringing in something like the new China film that they announced half a decade ago, or getting rid of the Beauty and the Beast sing-along, neither of those are going to move the needle. The one thing I'm going to throw out there, and I don't think this is on your radar, but for the Animal Kingdom, it would absolutely satisfy the need for drawing new guests, and wouldn't be like a $200 million investment. But if they could somehow bring giant pandas into the Animal Kingdom, it would absolutely be a draw for guests. Now, not to name drop here, I actually asked Joe Rohde about this back in 2013, and he pointedly told me that it's unlikely because the Chinese government doesn't loan pandas to for-profit institutions. However, some things have changed since then. Right now, the San Diego Zoo, the Atlanta Zoo, the Memphis Zoo, the National Zoo in DC all have pandas in them, all fairly recently. I believe Atlanta has been the only one that's been retaining them. And they're coming soon to the San Francisco Zoo. And Disney has also, since 2013, partnered with the Shanghai Shendi Group. So they have a relationship there. I have no idea how viable this is. This is really me just kind of throwing something against the wall and see if it sticks. But something that would be a minimal investment compared to a new ride would absolutely move the needle attendance-wise for the Animal Kingdom, absolutely be a draw. Other than that, you're looking at replacing shows, replacing Beauty and the Beast. That show's lived 15 years beyond its useful life. Fixing the broken things would garner goodwill, like fixing the Yeti, fixing the broken cannons and Rise of the Resistance, that type of stuff. All of those would be positive things, but the park down the street is opening 13 new attractions. That's pretty darn difficult to compete with unless you've got steep discounts and something else to compete with it from an attraction level. I think they just got to bite the bullet for a couple of years. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, all the things you mentioned, a lot of those, I'm like, oh, that would be great if they had, didn't have the Beauty and the Beast or whatever. But I know those aren't things you can really even put in a commercial or put on even on Disney Parks blog and draw a lot of interest.
No.
But I mean, to me, you mentioned entertainment. To me, that I was thinking of it also in terms of,
people don't book trips for that, though.
I know.
They tell positive experiences about it, which is good, but that's not booking a trip. None of this stuff is going to get somebody to book a trip. What it will do is give positive word of mouth, which doesn't mean immediate bookings after the fact. You're forging goodwill for beyond 2025 is what you're doing.
Which they don't seem to like to do because even though they say they want people to come back, they want you to come back next month so it can be this quarter. Right. They don't care, in 2 years. Wow. But the word of mouth is obviously important. It would have to be something really big, like, okay, like they just went nuts with Galaxy's Edge and said, we're going to just fill this with characters. We're going to have all these special events. We're going to have, it would have to be something that was so over the top and on Disney-like, because they don't really do that. And they just went crazy with it. And then they did the same thing.
A dozen character meet and greets in Galaxy's Edge would do it. I mean, that would help.
Something like that. It would have to, because you could sell that. You could be like, okay, you want to meet
Han, Luke, Leia, Lando, they're all here.
Yeah. Darth Vader, everybody. Just bring them all in.
Porkins, he's here too.
And, it's kind of like the old Star Wars Weekends idea. Heck, do that. I know they don't want to do it. They don't like it because, whatever, but do that. But I mean, the obvious one, which is so obvious that they won't do it because I think it costs a lot of money in logistics, was Magical Express. Obviously, you cannot just bring back Magical Express in a week. But if they even, I know.
All they got to do is wrap the buses. The buses are already there.
Really, though, if they even just said.
It's a good call.
Yeah, in January. Okay. We're letting you know in advance so you can book your trips. January 2026, we're going to do Magical Express. Heck, we're only going to do it starting out just for deluxe. Then maybe we'll do moderate, whatever. It could be a simple thing. And then, I don't know. Again, I don't know. But if you're thinking about bookings, to me, that there has to be things I'm not aware of that just make that impossible. Because it seems so obvious that if you want to rate beyond the obvious of free dining, 40% discounts, buy 3 days, get 2, all those types of things.
They've done those things.
Yeah.
I mean, those types of discounts do work. I mean, if they dial back some of the nickel and diming, because they've done the nickel and diming, they can start rolling some of those things into packages and unwinding it a little bit and do things like you just said. Deluxe resorts now come with Lightning Lane, like the Lightning Lane multi-pass, something like that. All of those are options potentially on the table, and what they roll into it remains to be seen. I mean, if bookings are soft and they're losing it to Epic Universe, if attendance drops at Animal Kingdom and Epcot, they'll have to start doing those things. I think that you rewind back in the day when they launched things like Magical Express, the idea was trap people on property, and there are still quite a few people that go to Disney World and don't have a rental car, and they use Disney transportation to get around. But getting to and from the parks is still a problem, and they're just finding other ways to do it. But by making it that much more convenient to do it, that was the idea. And I recognize that, 15 to 20 years later, you have ride shares, but taxi cabs existed back in the day. There were ways to get around. That isn't a new concept. I think you hit on a good point, but ultimately, if people want to go to Universal, Disney needs to do a lot more than offer a free shuttle from the airport.
Yeah, you would think so. And that's the thing. It's only a certain segment that thinks that I would think about might be like, if you're talking about diehard theme park fans, they're going to Epic Universe. It doesn't matter. Disney fans, Universal fans, whatever.
Right.
If you're talking about people that are like, well, we're going to go a week. Maybe we'll I mean, this is when you can buy 1-day tickets, which I know isn't really isn't possible with Epic Universe now, but will be at some point. Maybe we'll go to Universal for a day or two or whatever. Something like Magical Express might keep that, but it's not an earth-shattering thing. To me, it's as much about goodwill, and that's where, like you said, goodwill doesn't buy you immediate results. What it buys you is long-term success, which they've had.
And the current company doesn't think that way.
No. Iger never has thought that way, I feel like. I mean, maybe early, when he first arrived, he was doing things in response, like Buena Vista Street, in response to what was an obvious problem, but doesn't proactively, to me.
At least not in the parks. I think some of the acquisitions were absolutely long-term plays.
Oh, and they're great.
You look at Marvel's a perfect example of this. Lucasfilm is a perfect example of this. When Iger took over the mantle of Disney, Disney didn't have the males under 40 demographic. They just didn't have it at all. You would get parents back, you would get fathers back when their kids got into Disney, but you would lose them from like 15 to 40. And all right, so how do we fix that? Go by Marvel, go by Lucasfilm. Problem solved.
And by Pixar to help even shore up the family.
Right. When the animation studio, I mean, you were buying not just the Pixar library, you were buying the talent that was associated with it. And I mean, obviously John Lasseter is got some stink on him, to say the least, but
yeah,
he was absolutely a talented person, and for a while was the most instrumental person in the Disney fold from a talent perspective. And it is very clear, talent-wise, that Pixar has struggled since he's left.
Yeah, they've had good movies, but it
hasn't been the same.
Yeah, I mean, I know we just had, Inside Out 2, which I enjoyed, but it's a sequel, but they are going even more sequel-heavy, and which I'm sure is going to make tons of money, which they couldn't.
In fairness, though, I don't know that they've been like so sequel-heavy relative to the rest of the film industry. And granted, Disney often leads the charge with that thing. It's just that a lot of their original movies haven't hit. I mean, I liked Luca, I liked Soul, but I haven't watched them more than once. So
right.
Anyway, I
know we're veering away, but yeah, part of that was the pandemic too, because I think Soul would have been a pretty big hit, but unfortunately,
potentially, yeah,
and it's even hurt in Kanto. But regardless, Tim, we've kind of already rolled into what was going to be my next question about. Okay, I'll kind of phrase it this way: what if Epic Universe we expect is going to be a hit, but what if it's like it has the impact that the first Harry Potter land had, where all of a sudden it even is more earth-shattering than we think.
It takes 20% attendance drops at Epcot in the studios, something like that.
Something crazy, like probably not what's going to happen, but because people don't generally change their habits that quickly. But what if it is like that? I mean, what can Disney do? I mean, I'm not talking small.
I think they've already announced it. I think they've already announced their response. They did that at the D23 Expo. Right. But I mean, really, the response is turn on the money fire hose, just build more things and get into the true theme park wars that we've been wanting for 20 years. But they also need to, and we talked about this 5 minutes ago, they need to hold a mirror up to themselves and see if their current pricing models and upcharges are part of the problem. Because you're charging more for a more complicated touring experience, more complicated guest experience. And when people ask me, all right, I'm going to Disney World, what do I need to do? And I said, just bring your wallet. You just pay your way out of the problems.
Basically.
And this is coming from somebody, yes, familiarity breeds contempt here, but that's the answer. Whereas at Universal, it's a lot simpler. And don't get me wrong, it's a very similar solution. You can pay your way into a better experience at Universal as well. But I think the stress level touring a Universal park relative to the stress level of touring a Disney park is vastly different. I mentioned the D23 Expo. There were some things that were absolutely expected at D23 that weren't announced. An Imagination redo, Moana in Adventureland, and the Lion King ride in Africa. I suspect that all three of those projects are probably on the table in some way, shape, or form, and they're waiting to just turn the key on them. They clearly held some stuff back, even though they announced so much at the D23 Expo. But they know that what they announced very well may not be enough, because anybody that objectively knows the theme parks recognizes that when your competitor opens 13 new attractions, you probably need to match them in some way, shape, or form. And granted, Universal, you could argue, is trying to get up to Disney speed, and it's still 3 parks versus 4. But if you look at an attraction lineup, they're catching up pretty darn quickly as of May of next year. I think just turning on the money fire hose is really what it comes down to.
So I have a quick mystery question that I wanted to ask you that I thought was funny. We'll do it quickly. Not really funny, but I'm interested in your thoughts. No, nothing about baseball. It's related to theme parks. So Six Flags recently closed Kingda Ka. The tallest coaster in the world is Six Flags Great Adventure, and they did it with no advance notice. The only reason anyone knew was a bunch of coaster insiders found out and went and did last rides. Could Disney be doing a similar thing and waiting to announce that the Monsters Inc. land is replacing Muppets until the very last minute so people don't freak out?
Potentially. I mean, I think they're recognizing that they may have a Mr. Toad's Wild Ride situation on their hands. But I don't know what the plan. I was told a day or two before the announcement that Monsters Inc. was coming and was replacing Muppets. And as far as I know, nothing has changed on that plan. However, I have heard anecdotally, and whether it's true, that there was a plan to put Muppets in Liberty Square as a replacement for Hall of Presidents. I have no idea if that is a true rumor or not, and I don't have that from any source that I would trust. But it seems like that could very easily be fan speculation. If there was a plan to put the Muppets elsewhere and that subsequent plan has faded, it could simply be that they haven't quite figured out what they want to do with the Muppets, which is pretty much how Disney has handled the Muppets for the last 20 years. They haven't figured out what they want to do with the Muppets. I really think that the Muppets are, yes, they're a fan favorite, but they're not a big enough franchise to have Disney have this many headaches over it. And ripping the Band-Aid off, I'm not saying get rid of Muppet Vision, but I think that's what's going to happen. That I don't know that they need to solve the problem, because I think if they get rid of Muppet Vision, that like we are with every other news cycle, it will probably go away in a relatively short period of time, the outrage around it.
Yeah, I think...
I hate to say it, but...
Well, it's true, because you think about Great Movie Ride. I mean, the thing is, I don't want them to get rid of, like, attractions that I like. Selfishly, I totally get why they would remove Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island. Selfishly, but everyone always says nobody goes to Tom Sawyer Island. I'm like, that's true, though I did go to Disneyland. But I ride that riverboat all the time. It's like the perfect way to escape all the people. The problem is they close it early. They don't run it a lot, all those things. But so there are things that there are different areas, but I get it. And I think if the Cars Land is good. And that leads to the next question, because, I'm sad Disney is closing the Rivers of America Riverboat. I'm not sure I'll get it on, but, I'm old. I'm an old man. I want to just go sit on my boat and look out and go, oh, it's so pleasant, and sit, I'll do all that.
Do you have a piece of straw in your teeth?
Yeah, basically, just going to sit on my rocking chair and, just drink
sure
tea.
Is hot.
I don't really drink tea, but, okay. I don't really like the Cars movies that much. However, I think I am probably not giving this new land enough credit. We did learn a little news about it being it's a trackless ride. There was some at D23 Brazil. There was sort of some info on it, but not really that much. Similar to like the sleeper hit idea, because everyone's going villains, cool, and Tropical Americas and all that. And then I'm just like, oh yeah, they're putting Cars in. Do you think this could end up, if they really do the theming we saw and make it look cool, could this end up surprising us? Because, Radiator Springs is a great land, and Radiator Springs Racers is great, and it doesn't matter to me that I don't really love the Cars movies.
So we always talk about the overemphasis on IPs, because everything that Disney has built under Iger, with the exception of the soon-to-be defunct Red Car Trolleys stateside, has been an IP. Every new ride has been, which is in itself insulting. But let's say that they said, all right, we are going to put villains in the back of the park, and we need to figure out what we're doing with Frontierland. So our idea is a Pacific Northwest land. We're going to have some sort of ATV attraction not tied to an IP that is going to go around the Pacific Northwest. People would have been on board with that. Cars is in itself... Well, first off, it's a cartoon, but it is in itself kind of divisive only because it is more on the children's side of the Pixar movies. And I think that stretch of the Magic Kingdom has been a little bit more adult. I don't know how else to phrase it, but it's been for the more like mature guests. And not that there's thrill rides or anything like that there. It's the things that your older people in the parks would enjoy.
Like me.
Like Dan. And you are more of a Rivers of America guy than I. Like, I think it is aesthetically helpful to the park, but on my next trip, I will go over to Tom Sawyer Island and ride the riverboat for the first time in 20 years. It's not my thing. So this will be different kinetic energy to the park. It'll probably make that part of the park louder in a different way. But a high-speed trackless ATV attraction could be really, really fun. And if you just boil it down to that, I mean, I don't know that I'm really making significant leaps here, that if the attraction itself is good, the signature attraction in Cars Land, nobody's going to care. It just has to open. And we are very quick to dismiss things before they're built. I mean, how quickly was Pandora dismissed before it was built? Like, that's the perfect example of it.
Yeah, I love Pandora so much. Oh man, it's not even about the rides. It's just so cool. And I was like, didn't care about it at all, really. I
mean, in general, like the Frontierland Liberty Square theme is problematic for today's Disney company for a multitude of reasons. They're a company that needs to tie everything to an IP, and there aren't a lot of modern properties that hit upon Manifest Destiny in the Revolutionary War. So, like, that in itself just doesn't fit. So, putting in the Pacific Northwest area, they've done that in California Adventure. I mean, even if, not that it would be a logical fit here, but let's say that they were putting in Grizzly River Run instead of Cars Land. I think people would be okay with it. They'd be saying, all right, really? Like, it's not overwhelmingly positive, but it would be at least aesthetically interesting. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for. You know, waterfalls, moderately high mountains to kind of add to the aesthetics of it. I do hope that the flat ride is something on par with Junkyard Jamboree, which is pretty fun for like a B-ticket attraction. I'm not a fan of Luigi's Flying Tires or whatever it's called now. I mean, the Pacific Northwest area and concept itself is intriguing. So I'll give them that. It would not have been a choice that I would have made when all comes down to it. But again, we're not in Imagineering.
Very true. All right. Well, we are getting a little long here, but I'm going to quickly ask you this. So I like the idea of the Hall of Presidents, I think, more than I like the actual ride. But I think they got to get rid of it.
It's too divisive.
I just, especially, even if the election had gone completely differently.
We're not mature enough as a country to handle that attraction right now. There have been people booing that attraction since Bill Clinton.
Yeah, it's not going to get better now, I tell you.
No, it's not.
But not to veer that way. I'm trying to regardless. Okay, so let's say they need to get rid of it. You got Haunted Mansion over there. You got the Villains Land coming in. Do you just find a way to kind of rope that in with the bike, have the Haunted Mansion kind of lead you somehow into the Villains Land? I don't know.
I would say Haunted Mansion would become even more Fantasyland adjacent as it is. Liberty Square probably gets absorbed into Fantasyland. The theater for Hall of Presidents kind of backs up to PhilharMagic. Right. So you have some room there with that just complex of buildings kind of around Peter Pan's Flight, where there's a multitude of things that could be done, whether it is you take the Hall of Presidents Theater and do something else with it, or you just take that entire space, put a ride in there. There's any number of things here, but I think ultimately evolving the park beyond Liberty Square and even the traditional Frontierland is probably in order in the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think Country Bears, from what I've heard, the new show is very popular. I think that can stick around now, and plus you've got Big Thunder, so you still
There's also a recency bias there, so that could fade.
Oh, it could. I have not seen it in person, so I did watch it on YouTube because I don't feel like I was too worried about being spoiled or anything. But okay, on a related note, can't just say Muppet Vision, but what's the next attraction that Disney either announces or decides to remove or really change that makes everybody really mad?
So besides Muppets?
Yeah.
So whether they get mad or not. So, I mean, Imagination, people aren't going to get mad. People are going to be happy.
No, I think
Rock and Roller Coaster, I think people are anticipating something like that. I could see Star Tours going and the people getting upset about that.
I would be upset. I like Star Tours.
But other candidates and your anger may vary, I guess. Grand Fiesta Tour. And I say that simply because they announced the Coco attraction in California, and we know that a Coco attraction at one point was on the table for Epcot. Seas with Nemo and Friends, Spaceship Earth, they announced something years ago where if that was a drastic change to Spaceship Earth, then that would absolutely be the one that upsets people. But other things like Hall of Presidents, I don't think you're going to really get people upset about that. Other things that I've heard recently was Winnie the Pooh. But I can imagine Winnie the Pooh moves too much merchandise.
You keep naming stuff like Nemo, even where I'm like, that's fine.
Yeah, nobody's going to lose.
But I do want to keep the aquarium, so I'll give that caveat, But I'm like, that's good. We can Pooh. I mean,
we know that they wanted to do an update to Spaceship Earth, and they're actually overdue for one. It's a matter of just how drastic it's going to be. So it could be Spaceship Earth, but if they do a marginal update, and regardless of what you think of the Judi Dench version, it is still fundamentally Spaceship Earth.
Yeah.
That if they change what Spaceship Earth is, I would say that that's probably the one that would upset people the most.
Yeah, I put together a quick list, and it was big change to Spaceship Earth. I also thought about Carousel of Progress, and then I thought I
could see that being removed.
They could just stop showing Impressions of France, which would personally make me very sad.
That would. But again, I think that's like a one news cycle type situation.
Not for me, Tim.
I'm not disputing it. And you've had great interviews on Impressions of France, and it's a fantastic show, but you now have to go out of your way to see it.
Yeah, I did. I just lucked out. We were going to see American Adventure, and then it had just started. And so then we were over in France doing Ratatouille, and I was like, this was with my daughter, and she was not super thrilled. And I was like, we're going to see Impressions of France. It's 7:00 or something. And we went, and it was the first showing of the night, and it was packed. But good. I think it's because it only showed 3 times or twice.
Right. And that's part of the problem. If you want to see that show, you need to plan that. You need to plan for that show more than you do Soarin'.
Oh yeah. Okay.
At this point.
Real quick, I'm going to jump around a little bit because we just mentioned it. Epcot, are we thinking the next big change is going to be an Imagination Pavilion overhaul? Is that the next big thing?
I really do.
It's not going to be a World Showcase Pavilion, probably. Right?
It could be, but if it wasn't announced at Brazil's D23 Expo, there was a budget for a Brazil Pavilion. And so on a recent episode of Disney Dish Podcast, Jim Hill talked about a 2017 era Epcot plan, and it was a 5 to 7 year plan. So those plans have circulated. I saw 2 different versions of it, and of the things on that plan that haven't been announced yet, the 2 biggest ones were an Imagination update, one of which had a budget of $280 million, and another one had a budget of $350 million. Yeah, that's nothing to sneeze at. And I don't know what it entails. It's just an Imagination update. But the other thing on there was a Brazil Pavilion. There's no secret that a Brazil Pavilion was on the table at one point. And that actually had a budget of $450 million, $200 from Disney. So there were substantial budgets being discussed for these 2 projects. And clearly they pivoted to other things as part of the Epcot redo. But those things are in some way, shape, or form still on the table for Epcot, especially if it takes a big hit from Epic Universe.
Yeah, it's probably something that gets announced a year or 2 from now and then is built 4 or 5 years after that.
That's the other thing. There's only so many things you can take offline at once. The Seas with Nemo and Friends was also on that list. Spaceship Earth was also on that list. Yeah. And each of those things are a year and a half to do it at minimum. Imagination is probably more, but you're talking
3 years.
Maybe you can take 2 of those offline at the same time, but you can't take all 3 of them offline at the same time.
Especially now, you got to wait till Test Track comes back.
Right,
and it's just do you want to have a few minutes when we have everything? I don't know. But okay, last big question. Don't need to give me a very long answer, but how are we feeling about Tropical Americas here? Because we now know, since the last time we talked, I know it was speculated, but we are having Encanto, pretty high-tech ride, it looks like. Indiana Jones, not the same version, but similar, but some new story. And then a carousel with Disney character animals. And then other, shops, dining, whatever. What are you thinking about this?
I'm pretty excited about it. I think Animal Kingdom was always the most beautiful park in Florida. People always talk about how good looking a park Tokyo Disney Sea is. Animal Kingdom was the only park in Florida that was on par with it aesthetically, with the notable exception of Dinorama. Dinorama is an absolute eyesore, and this aims to fix that. But I also would say that the two story tropes for the main attractions seem to be on theme for the park. And I don't think it was as much of a creative leap as the Moana Zootopia combo that they presented in 2022. Actually, again, to name drop once again, at the D23 Expo, I spoke with Chris Beatty about this, and he basically said, and this could have just been lip service to me, that Josh D'Amaro loves Imagineering and he wanted to show stuff off. And that's why the 2022 announcements were as they were. And I think Disney recognizes it, that it was a mistake to put that out there that early, or it truly was a feeler and they're just changing the narrative around it. But I don't like that dinosaurs are probably gone from the park. I don't like that there's probably not an animal walkthrough here, but in general, this is absolutely a positive development for that park.
I mean, I agree. Yeah, I was hoping for some sort of animals, and it is too bad, but you knew once Indy was coming in that dinosaur wasn't going to survive, unfortunately. But I do think that it is going to even out that park much better with
let's hope so.
Pandora and Safari, and then Everest, and that it should line up pretty well. So. Good deal. All right. Well, Tim, I wanted to ask you real quick, will we ever see another attraction in the Wonders of Life building? This is an extra question. This one, I had to get your answer for this one.
Ever I hope so.
In our lifetimes, will there be one? I'm not talking Festival Center, an attraction.
So this has been something, I mean, again, fanboy wishes at its finest here. To me, we've done shows on this on Marty Called to name drop our podcast here, where my ask is having this be a World's Fair pavilion, like setting this up, and that can take a multitude of forms, whether it truly has something like a Horizons variant and it's a Small World variant, Carousel of Progress in it. Not necessarily, but you could have it be an exhibit space for the 64-65 World's Fair, and that would be a good temporary exhibit, but also a great permanent exhibit, especially if you can highlight it with an actual major attraction or two. Certainly Disney isn't going to do that. And going back to what we said about their 5-year plan, I don't think there was anything about the Play Pavilion on any of those 2017 plans. I think you've seen the same things that I have. I mean, clearly they have space here to do something, and whatever form that takes remains to be seen. But I think they need to fix or upgrade many of the attractions in the park before we see any action here. Right now, it's not really bothering anybody. And Imagination, Seas, Mission Space, there's half a dozen of things that they could probably address beforehand before putting an addition there. The only reason to do that is if the money fire hose needs them to do multiple projects simultaneously.
Could they just put something different in that Disney and Pixar short film theater? That's all I ask, Tim. That's all I ask. Can we start there?
Put One Man's Dream in there.
Anything. Just show Magic Journeys. I don't care. Just put something in.
Magic Journeys is a really weird show.
Actually, that might freak me out. I don't know if I go in there. But, put
you're not wrong.
in there.
You're not wrong. I mean,
Disney previews. I don't care. That's still better.
Run the Imagineering story in there. Seriously.
God.
Like there's a multitude of things that could be run in there. They could do a history of Epcot from original concept of the city to today and do that. I mean, didn't they just do something like that on Discovery Channel or National Geographic?
Wasn't that great? But
again, it's the Pixar Short Film Festival. The bar is very low.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You could just be like it's bad where I'm like, play trailers for upcoming movies, and that would be an improvement over what's in there right now.
What about the video ahead of Captain EO, where they're showing like the making of Captain EO? Do you like the making of Captain EO, where you got some old school Joe Rohde footage? I
have been complaining about that during almost the entire lifetime of this show. I know Captain EO was there when the show started, but oh my gosh, I bet you there's a show, Tim and I, that you and I did in like 2017 where I was complaining about that same theater. I don't know how long
people
it's been
have just given up. It's
just like,
I wonder if lightning lanes are available for it right now.
Do they actually still have lightning lanes?
I don't know if they do.
Can you book it in advance as a tier 2 selection at 9 a.m.?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Tim,
dropping that.
I don't even know how long this show's been. It might be longer than others. I know we did an hour and a half one before, but so we might not be there, but we're close. But we're not trying to set a record here. But I got to ask you this question, Tim. Now that this show is ending soon, how are you going to spend all your extra time commuting now? What are you going to do now that I know you just listen to shows over and over, right? So
I've told Dan this behind the scenes. I now have like an 8-minute commute, depending on traffic. So I don't get to listen to as many podcasts as I want to, and I absolutely pick and choose. But I certainly appreciate the run that you've had on this show. If people are listening just for me, first off, why? But go back through the history, because Dan he's picked out some names that you know, but he's also picked out some names that you don't, and some of those names that you don't are amongst the better shows here. And I don't think you were soliciting me.
No, I was definitely not.
But there are some great evergreen interviews on this show, and I do want to congratulate you on a very great run.
No, thank you. But more importantly, we should talk about your show that will be continuing beyond, a few more episodes, I would hope. Hopefully when I'm on, you won't just decide to end it after that. But tell us a little bit about...
podcast kryptonite.
Yes, that's it. It's all done. Tell us about Marty Called a little bit and where listeners can check it out.
So Marty Called is primarily an armchair Imagineering show, but we have spun off a few different other show tropes, and Dan has partaken in at least one of those and another one coming up. The one that you're coming up on, I can tease it right here, is we're going to do a draft, like a fantasy style draft from a fantasy league, but we're going to be drafting original attraction music on the show. So I don't know about you, I've already come up with my list on that, but the show is Skipper Ben Rebstock for you old good Inside the Magic days, and occasionally Josh Fenton from I guess Kingdom Cast and his own nightmares. As well as myself hosting about a once a month show. And we touch on news, but we usually do so with an analytical approach from an Imagineering perspective as well.
Yeah, it's a really fun show. I enjoy it.
It's called Marty Called, by the way.
Yes.
I don't know if I said that.
I really enjoyed Marty Called. I liked when you called in at like the middle of the night after the D23 announcements and talked to Ben, who was going off the ledge about Muppet Vision already. So that was fun. But no, seriously, it's a fun show, and you guys should all check it out. I know you probably know about it from Tim being on the show 250 times, and Ben was just on recently, but it's a really good show.
The episode that Dan was on was episode 73, and we did an animatronic draft back then. This would have been, I guess, April of this year that we did that one. So if you want some more Dan, episode 73 of the Marty Called podcast as well.
And I think I won the draft. That's what I would tell you. I know there's no real winners. It's all just for fun. But
isn't it just the friends we made along the way, Dan?
It's basically it.
Yep.
But Tim, thank you for being on this show 9 times. And for this episode, lots happening. I'm excited about Epic Universe and some of the things Disney's doing. And I'm really excited for the return of Magical Express any day now. So
yeah, don't hold your breath on
let's
that.
announce it here now. But thank you, Tim. This has been great.
Always a pleasure. Congrats on a great run, Dan.
Thanks again to Tim for spending a lot of time over the years going back to early 2017, being on this show where then we were talking about, well, a lot of the same topics, really, especially about EPCOT. But a few things did change. So the easy one is Tim did refer to Premier Pass, Lightning Lane Premier Pass, and said it was currently only at deluxe resorts, and he thought he wasn't sure if it was really going to take. We have heard that I'm still not sure what to make of the fact that it's sold out on Thanksgiving week. Like, what does that mean, really? I think it means people expect it to be crazy and they're taking a shot on this new thing. However, the bigger thing is Disney has now extended it to all Walt Disney World resorts, which is a bigger deal and shows that they believe this really has legs and is not just a pilot program. I'm sure they always intended to do this, especially when you have Thanksgiving and then Christmas coming up. It seems like the right time, but still skeptical about using it, but it does interest me. The one I really want to talk about is the changes to Muppet Vision and Rock and Roller Coaster. So Disney released on the Disney Parks blog an article, if you'd like to check it out. I'll link to it in the show notes, but it was from Friday, November 22nd. New doors open for Monsters and Muppets at Hollywood Studios. This is the most recent version of the article. Of course, I'm looking at right now as I record this on Sunday, basically yesterday, if you're listening to this when it came out. So it basically says, get ready to open the door because Mike and Sully are coming to town, and it's part of it is they've already announced this. This is not new. The new thing is to make way for the monsters, Kermit the Frog, Miss Piggy, and more of their friends will be moving right along to Sunset Boulevard. So that's interesting that even the way they present it, not like they're leaving, they're moving. And the fact is that they are putting in Monstropolis for where Muppet Vision is right now. And they also mentioned, too, that there is going to be a theater show there. So that area is going to have the suspended ride with the door vault like we talked about, but then dining and shopping and a whole new theater show. So I think the idea is the theater show would go where Muppet Vision currently is, and then the door coaster would kind of take over because, they were going to replace the courtyard. You got Mama Melrose and Pizza Rizzo that could be switched over to something. But I think the idea, the way it looks like this theater show likely would take the place of what's currently Muppet Vision. And then you kind of expand back from there for the coaster and everything else. So up front, I have to say, this wasn't a complete shock, given even if you hear what Tim and I talked about on this show. But I do really like Muppet Vision. I still enjoy it. I appreciated the fact that they had added those projection effects to it recently, which I thought was super cool. So it surprised me a little bit just because they just made updates to it, and it also seemed to make sense, and there were some other dead areas in the park. But they determined that this is the area they wanted to put Monsters, Inc. and everything else. And also with the theater show, they had a theater there that they thought they could use. So starting out with Muppet Vision, Jim Henson worked on it, basically one of the last things he worked on. And there is some history that you go, and my daughter has really gotten into the Muppets. She's 11 years old. Her and my wife have been watching like all kinds of different Muppet things on YouTube, well beyond the movies and everything else. Even when we went in March, before they did that, she really loved Muppet Vision. Now, just as an example, that people still really enjoyed this movie. But I understand. I mean, it's an older show. Disney is thinking still that the Muppets, while having a role, more on that in a minute, they still want to use that space for Monstropolis and put that there and decided that Muppet Vision is less important than adding a new theater show. So while it's disappointing, I'm not going to get this riled up. I know it's very easy to be like, what is Disney even doing? What is Imagineering doing? They have no idea what they're doing. I don't think that's really fair. I think that's more internet outrage, if you will. But I understand a lot of us, Skipper Ben, for example, are going to be really sad about this for a wide variety of reasons. Some relate to Jim Henson, some relate to loving the ride, another relate to it there being another thing that everyone can do. It's also very funny. It's one of the few attractions that recalls back to classic Disney MGM Studios. All those reasons I totally understand, and I feel all of those reasons to a certain extent. But I will say I was pleasantly surprised by what they decided to do with Rock and Roller Coaster. But before I move away from Muppet Vision, they do say that they are having creative conversations about the future of Muppet Vision. Yeah, let's hear. We are having creative conversations and exploring ways to preserve the film and other parts of the experience for fans to enjoy in the future. Now, you could read this as being on Disney Plus, or having it just like some little thing. Preserve the film. There could be a lot of different ways you could do it. Or you could read this as putting it in a new place, which could be right now where the Villain show is going to go, where the Cars show was, which would make a lot of sense given the fact that they are putting in the Muppets Electric Mayhem and everything else into Rock and Roller Coaster. More on that in a minute. They could do that. They could put it in EPCOT to where the Disney and Pixar short film series is, because that already is a 3D theater. It could fit there. You could put it in where, I don't know, I wouldn't think you'd do this, but in theory, you could put it in where Laugh Floor is if you move Laugh Floor out, or just a variation of it, and put that in with Monstropolis, which seems likely. Or you could put the Muppets in where Hall of Presidents is. I don't think you would just do a straight up Muppet Vision 3D there, but you could do something like that, especially given what Tim and I even talked about with kind of the divisiveness and everything else with Hall of Presidents. Not with the attraction itself, more with us, with the world. So that gives me hope. I'm not going to get too excited because I know in the past they've said, oh, we're they've said things like this in the past, and then it doesn't end up really going anywhere. And to me, Disney Plus is nice and all, but some people have already done really good work on YouTube. I suspect we're going to see even better work in the next however many months before it closes, because we don't know when it closes. So that's another part of it. But I do want to talk about the Rock and Roller Coaster change, because I know people have talked for years about the idea of putting the Electric Mayhem into Rock and Roller Coaster, which would get Aerosmith out of there. The music would be less, that way. And, and plus Steven Tyler, the news that hasn't been positive there either, pretty awful, actually. And then, so you want to get away from that. The music's kind of old. And then you have the Muppets, which are a Disney IP. You find a way to put it there. That's all interesting. But it still surprised me that they did it, because it almost made too much sense. Sometimes when there are changes from Disney that you're like, that almost makes too much sense, I think of it as like fan fiction. Like it would never happen. Like, I almost put that on par with like, oh, someday Disney could bring back Horizons or something, and put it where in the Wonders of Life Pavilion or whatever, things that I'm just like, that is never, ever going to happen. I thought it seemed more likely they would somehow do something Marvel related, which made me nervous about Tower of Terror. Now I have no idea. So I think this is a positive move. I think having the Muppets in Rock and Roller Coaster is a cool way to have them in an attraction with Disney IP and get out from Aerosmith, which I like Rock and Roller Coaster, and I don't have anything against Aerosmith. I think their music, some of their songs are good, but I do think, even when in the 1999, it wasn't like, they were still kind of on the upswing again from things like Living on the Edge and James Got a Gun and all that. But still, it's not like they just became outdated. They've been older guys. They're kind of, they're pretty old, let's say. So I think that's a good move. Now, obviously, people that love the Muppets go, hey, I love Muppet Vision, but I can't ride a roller coaster due to motion sickness or whatnot. Just this is pretty intense. That is disappointing. That's why I hope something does happen with Muppet Vision. But overall, looking at it overall from like a less, oh my gosh, I'm so sad about this. I think that while it's sad to lose Muppet Vision, that is sad, getting them in Rock and Roller Coaster, I think, is an interesting move from Disney. And also, given that if the villain show that's coming in for Cars, let's say it's only a year or two, maybe either with Muppet Vision or with something else, you could put the Muppets there in that theater right there, and you have a little Muppets land, which I think is a really cool idea. Now, Disney hasn't said they're going to do that. I just find that really interesting. And part of me still kind of likes the idea, if you're really not going to do much with imagination for a while, putting the Muppet Vision 3D, especially because they're like, it's a new technology with imagination, into the Imagination Magic Eye Theater. They have not presented any of that, but that really interests me too. Well, I know we're getting long on this, so I think I just wanted to address that, and I found it to be an interesting topic. And I just wanted to say again, thanks to Tim for being on the show. If you'd like to stay in touch with me, just follow. Hey, I'm on Blue Sky now. It's just at the Dan Heaton, TheDanHeaton. A lot of people have connected on there. This is I'm going to talk about everything, not just theme parks. But I will talk about theme parks. I did talk about Muppet Vision on there. But if you want to follow me on there, that's great. And of course, submit your ideas for episode 250. Email me, dan@tomorrowsociety.com. We got 3 episodes left, including the finale. Just in case you're not paying as much attention, I know people still are kind of listening and going, wait, you're ending the show? It's like, yes, I've made the decision. But I'm excited about the last few episodes. Really enjoy getting a chance to talk to Tim once more, and then get to add another 10 minutes here at the end. But I'd love to hear what you think of these changes and everything else happening right now. I think it's sad to lose another attraction that we all really enjoy, but I do feel like Disney is doing something interesting here. While it's not what I would exactly do, it's not the worst scenario for me either. And I'm not just trying to play the middle. I just think that it's a complicated situation, and I think they're doing some interesting things in Hollywood studios. And the fact that we still have a theater show, I kind of hope we can get Laugh Floor out of Tomorrowland and do something more interesting with that area too. Which would be cool. All right, have a good one out there. Take care. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Always great to hear from you. Love that you're still listening near the end. Talk to you again next time.